Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County Forum for candidates for Snohomish County Sheriff. I'm Nadine Shanti, and I'm a member of the League. This forum is being live streamed to our League YouTube channel. To those in the virtual space, thank you for joining us. Let me take a minute to give you some background information on the position of sheriff. The county sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the county and enforces state and local laws relating to the protection of all county citizens and property. Responsibilities include patrols in all unincorporated areas, as well as numerous contracted cities to, to head search and rescue endeavors, enforce traffic laws, investigate major crimes, and keep all criminal records. Candidates for Snohomish County Sheriff are Adam Fortney and Susanna Johnson. It is the policy of the League to be nonpartisan. Therefore, we neither endorse, we neither endorse nor oppose candidates or parties. The rules for participation in this forum were sent ahead of time to all candidates. I will pose the questions, and for this forum, the candidates will have up to 2 minutes to answer each question. We are using a countdown timer visible to the candidates, and time limits on answers will be strictly enforced. I will change the starting order for each question, alternating candidates in the starting position to ensure a fair sequence. The order for the first question will be Alan Fortney, followed by Susanna Johnson. So, Mr. Fortney, let's begin. What are the major issues you feel need to be addressed by the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office? Please explain why you are focusing on these issues. Mr. Fortney, you're muted.
I won't do that again. I promise. I promise. I promise.
Okay.
Thank you for having me tonight. I really appreciate this forum and the League of Women Voters. This is fantastic. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'll be within the 2 minutes. I'm the incumbent. I've been there for 4 years. So I got to talk a little bit about what I've done because I think it's super important of the stuff that we have been able to do. So there's several areas that I have to talk about in a very short amount of time. It is the fentanyl epidemic that is raging in our communities right now. Crime. I think every candidate for sheriff is going to say crime. I'm going to say crime, but try to expand on that a little bit. And then wellness for our people and youth, which I have a unique, I think, perspective on that. And so I'm going to start with crime. What do we do about crime? It is always an issue, no matter what we do, and no matter which sheriff is in office. I think we have taken a proactive approach to crime during my 4 years in office. I sometimes get, the tough on crime guy and all that kind of stuff. I'm okay with that. But what I like to follow that up with, which I think is equally important and I'm equally passionate about, is the compassion side of what we do. Are we getting people help? Because I think in Snohomish County, I'm born and raised here. I know this county and the community really well. They want us police focusing on compassion and getting people help. Can we get them out of the criminal justice system instead of just repeat offenders all of the time? So I am just as passionate about both of those things. The fentanyl crisis. This takes up at least a portion of my week. Every single work week we have, I spent hours on this last week, and we need to make sure we are doing the right things on the street. And what I mean by that is we are usually the first people that come in contact with people in crisis, and we got to make sure that we're doing what we call the Office of Neighborhoods or outreach teams, paired with social workers, getting them services if needed. If they do come into our facility, that's the Snohomish County Jail, we need to make sure we're doing the same thing and offering services there.
Thank you, Mr. Fortney. Ms. Johnson.
Yes, thank you so much. And I appreciate as well this opportunity to speak with you and providing this conduit for us to reach the community. The three major issues for me are public safety, public trust, and every employee investment initiative. Public safety, we have every person has a right to feel safe. We know public safety is a huge issue right away. Based upon the polls we've been seeing the last few years, people just feel less safe than they did just 3 or 4 years ago. And so we do need to do things differently for our community. Examples of that are crime fighting strategies that include evidence-based policing. So there are a lot of strategies out there. I know I won't have time in my 2 minutes, but it is also dual response, and it's focusing on gun crimes and drug crimes. Public trust. Since the murder of George Floyd, there has been a national reckoning for law enforcement, and the expectation of accountability and holding our own accountable is critical. I think if we didn't understand it before 2020, we do now. For legitimacy and able to keep our community safe, they must trust us first. So these go hand in hand. And then on the employee investment, that is really specific to taking care of the people who we want to take care of you. Unless we do a good job with them, and that is not only training such as de-escalation and bias training, but professional standards. Being an accredited law enforcement agency is really important. Making sure we're not doing bias policing, but also the people. It's that work-life balance, it's wellness, it's making sure they get the needed rest, because when our deputies or our employees are tired or stressed or their mental health is not good, then they may make mistakes in the field. And so taking care of them helps us take care of you.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, you'll start this next question. What qualifications and experience make you a good choice to address these issues?
So I have 33 years of law enforcement experience so far, 30 years of that working at the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. That 30 years was from deputy sheriff all the way to bureau chief of operations. So that's number 3 overall, and not just straight up. So I got to work in all of the law enforcement divisions, not only as an employee or a field worker, but also I've led in every division. So that is deputy sheriff, detective, canine handler, SWAT team member, squad leader, sergeant in charge of office professional accountability. I've been a lieutenant, a captain, and of course I mentioned chief. I did hiring as a lieutenant. On top of all my law enforcement experience, which also includes the National Academy, which is the gold standard of international executive law enforcement training, I also have my AABA and master's degree. And I recently realized I'm endorsed by all 5 former county sheriffs, and they did an assessment on my qualifications and have declared in writing that I am actually the most qualified person to ever run for Snohomish County Sheriff. Why does that matter? When we have really complex issues like fentanyl and homelessness and our housing unstable, addiction, and mental health, we need to be able to partner with everybody. We need to have solutions that go beyond what our typical law enforcement solutions. And I have that experience. By being the chief of operations, I worked with all of our contract cities, and we were able to tailor our response to each neighborhood and community for effectiveness. So I bring that experience, not only at the sheriff's office, but I've been at the Bothell Police Department the last 3 years serving as the deputy chief. So I've learned municipal policing and county policing, and I'm ready to come home and bring these skills back.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Fortney, your qualifications and experience.
Yeah, I've been at the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office for 27 years. I worked a lot of my time was in patrol. I did 10 years in the canine unit. I promoted to sergeant in 2014. I did a 5-year stint on a SWAT team, and I have a different path, and I think it's unique. And I'm going to talk about my leadership perspective a little bit, in that I ran as a graveyard patrol sergeant back in 2019 against a 6-year incumbent sheriff. And as my opponent just said, she was part of that former administration, and that's okay. But I ended up getting into politics when I was a street cop, still a patrol sergeant running a crew. So I bring that perspective. I like to think the resume, the self-proclaimed most qualified candidate in history. I'm not sure where that comes from, because I'm sitting here doing the job, and I'm thinking, as we're going through these lists of things that my opponent wants to bring, and I think they sound great. They really do. They sound great in this forum. I'm going through the checklist in my mind. I've done it. I'm a get stuff done guy. Okay. I haven't been to the NA. To be honest, I went to the Dallas IACP last year and heard the Dallas police chief talk, and he gave his backstory because he hadn't been to the NA. And he goes, I had the opportunity, he had the opportunity when he was back in his other department in California as a lieutenant. And he said, you know what? I understand that is a checkbox for a lot of people, but for me, I'm not going to miss that home run. I'm not going to miss that touchdown from my son. I share that perspective with the Dallas Police Chief, Eddie Garcia. I'm a homebody. I'm born and raised in Snohomish County. I want to be here working on Snohomish County issues. And I think you can look at my 4-year track record now. The wellness thing, man, we have been so innovative and creative in the last 4 years. Physical fitness is important for the police. I allowed them to do it for up to 1 hour. It's up to their supervisors, 1 hour a day. And now we're building gyms in all our facilities. Mental health. We now have a program that any of our employees can get mental health. So a lot of that stuff, we're actually doing it.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Forty, we're going to start with you again. Tell us about your leadership style. What values are of greatest importance to you? And please give a brief example that demonstrates this.
Ooh, that's a good one. My leadership style, I kind of just went into that. I think I bring a different style. There's no doubt about it. I have never had a desk job in my life before I got this job. Now it kind of is. I got to get out there. I got to be involved. I want to do stuff out in the community. And if anything I've done right as the sheriff, I have been out in the community. I think the greatest thing, it'd be easy to say ethics. It'd be easy to say integrity, because all those things are absolutely important. Our core values at the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office are integrity, dignity, commitment, and pride. They're so important to me. I put them on the walls of every precinct in our 4th floor our main sheriff's office in downtown Everett, because I want our employees to have a visual and see them when they come in every single day, so they're reminded. But I'm going to give you a different one. Because I gave this a lot of thought. And I think in 2023, what people are craving, and it's kind of who I am, you'll probably figure that out as we go on here, is authenticity. I think authenticity in our elected officials is so important. I have talked to, not just this year, going out in the community is not an election year thing for me. It's been busier this year, don't get me wrong, but I've been doing it all 4 years. I talk to all groups, large and small. And so that's where that comes from. I think they want us to be authentic. Who are you? Where do you stand on issues? What have you done? And for me, the incumbent, it would be, what did I tell everybody I was going to do in 2019? And did I carry it out? Now, I know my time's running out on this answer, so I'll finish it up and say this. There you go.
20 seconds.
I have absolutely kept my word. When I ran in 2019, I think it's safe. I think I can say this. Nobody expected me to win. It was against my boss, the 6-year incumbent sheriff, but they bought into what I was telling them I wanted to do. And so I have kept my word from everything I said in 2019. And I think people want us to be authentic in elected office.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, your leadership style.
My leadership style, I would call it as transformational. I believe in the, the inspiration where you're trying to encourage people to move beyond what they think their own skills can bring or do. I've always felt inspired by that. For my values, it's integrity, service, and leadership. I do want to comment. I really appreciate my opponent's values and him talking about the sheriff's office values. Those are actually near and dear to me as well. I was part of the team that actually wrote those as a sergeant, I feel like 100 years ago, and they've maintained through several sheriffs' tenure. And so I think that's very cool that they still have them today, because I think those are great values as well. But for me, integrity, service, and leadership, integrity goes without saying. Everything we do has to be with integrity. That is just the whole social contract we have with our community. Leadership, I can give you lots of examples of leadership. We were talking about this just the other day. Leading in the field, I think, comes naturally to law enforcement, whether it's, you're on SWAT or you're that squad leader or you're running a crew to make those tactical decisions. Those things come a little bit easier to us because they're ingrained pretty early in our career. But leadership is also, behind closed doors when you're making long-term decisions on, the future of an agency, or stuff as mundane as budget, those things that maybe seem boring as administrators, but are really critical if you're trying to continue leading an agency effectively. But leadership is also admitting to a community if you did something wrong, right? Saying those hard things. For me, I'll end on the service piece because I've always been community oriented. I've worked with a youth group for 30 years, and it's always been about service. And I think there's a lot of parallels. But if you do everything with a service mindset, no matter what you're touching right now, you're going to be serving your community well. So that means the most to me.
Thank you very much. Ms. Johnson, we'll start with you. What discretion, if any, do you believe the sheriff and or deputies should have to enforce local, state, and federal laws? Please give an example that explains your position.
Certainly. So deputy sheriffs, we enforce local and state laws. Typically, we're not enforcing federal laws, and many of the federal laws we cannot enforce, like the immigration laws. In fact, it usually requires, it's pretty rare, a cross deputization in order to do some of the federal laws. With regard to discretion, we do encourage deputy discretion or officer discretion on low-lying crimes. So those are things that generally are not a crime of violence. They could be infractions or traffic stops. It's an opportunity for them to problem solve. What we're generally looking for when they're out in the public is not to make a lot of arrests or write a lot of tickets. It's to change behavior, encourage positive interactions. So we do encourage that, not felonies, not where there's an actual victim of a crime. Of course, that's problematic. But a couple things come with that. One is we want to be equitable or equal in how we use discretion. And the reason that it's called officer discretion is it should be done on the line level. I think where we run into problems, and probably the basis of this question, is if there's a overall direction, like it's problematic for a chief or a sheriff to give direction that we, for example, would not enforce a law. A random example might be Second Amendment stuff, that we have a lot of laws that have changed in this state with regard to firearms. So if I came out and made a statement that said, I'm going to be the decider, there's constitutional sheriff philosophies, but if I'm going to be the decider of what we can enforce or not enforce, or encourage wholehandedly to not enforce some laws, I think that's where people start getting concerned or worry whether or not we are going to follow the legislation and the laws in our state. So line level is appropriate. Directives, I think, from leaders of law enforcement agencies is where it starts becoming problematic, in my opinion. Thank you.
You. Mr. Fortney, same question.
Yeah, discretion is incredibly important to everything we do every single day. When we come into contact in contact with people, it's usually not a good day for them. I mean, just generally speaking, for the most part. But we're there to investigate. We're there to determine what is the best course of action for this fellow human being in our society. And a lot of time that's not jail. I would even say if it is a felony. Now, if you committed a felony, you're probably earned a trip to the Snohomish County Jail, and I understand that. But a lot of people don't understand there's very few sections of law where we are mandated by state authority to make an arrest. Assault for domestic violence is a serious crime, but it's on the level of crime, it's a gross misdemeanor. But we're mandated by state law to make an arrest. The state has taken that discretion away from us, and I'm good with that. Rightfully so. It's been that way for 30 years. But you could have a homicide somewhere, or you could say a felony assault, and maybe there's a self-defense component too that the deputies have to get there and investigate and figure out what the heck happened. They are not mandated by state law to make an arrest. So discretion is something we do every day. I think discretion, drugs have been a big topic for me the last 4 years in the state of Washington. A lot of people don't realize this, but the state legislature basically said drugs were legal in a certain context, generally speaking, during 2 of the last 4 years. That's been difficult for us. Now, booking into the Snohomish County Jail every single drug user is not the answer to solving the fentanyl, the heroin epidemic in our society. It's not. Do I think it could be a portion of it? Yeah, I do. I think we can really help people in our jail. But that's where I'm going to go kind of back up to my first answer is when we come across people, they might be breaking the current drug laws, which they went back and changed it. And but are we getting that person help, right? Are they willing to get help? We are doing that work every day in Snohomish County, and that's where discretion plays a part.
Thank you. Mr. Fortney, we'll start with you. What expectations will you set for your deputies? And what strategies do you believe should be in place to hold deputies accountable for behaviors and actions? Great
question. I have lived this for 4 years. As has already been mentioned, our whole world changed when George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis in 2020, and rightfully so. The police, no matter where you worked in the country, you better be reflecting internally, and we did so as well. And so we have to make sure we are holding our own accountable. That is an expectation, not only in the state of Washington, in Snohomish County. So I've been the sheriff for 4 years. I'm not going to tell you what I want to do. I'm going to tell you exactly what I did, because we take it real seriously. We have, historically speaking, we have what we call an Office of Professional Accountability. For the sake of time, well, let's call it OPA tonight. Okay, that's our internal investigation. It's been one sergeant. Okay, that one sergeant typically did not want the job. No, but it's not a well sought after job. But we always got someone, and they usually liked it a whole lot better once they were in there. One sergeant, 850 employees. You can do the math on that. That is outside the nationwide standards. It doesn't work. Okay. So at a time where there's also recruitment and retention problems all over the country in our profession, I have managed to make that a focus still. So we've taken the one sergeant, it's now a lieutenant, so one above a sergeant. A lieutenant oversees the OPA unit, and we have 3 sergeant investigators. So we expanded that threefold. We expanded it because we knew our community, our state of Washington, was demanding that of the police, and we felt we could do a better job. But I got to tell you, it was not comfortable making those decisions, and I have taken some flack for those decisions internally from our own people. You know, it's the constant debate. Deputies on patrol, which we always want. That's where my heart is. That's where I came from, right? Versus these things that you might not run into the people every day because they're up on the 4th floor doing these investigations. I have made those difficult decisions, and we have expanded our internal investigation unit.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, same question.
Sure. Starting off with the Office of Professional Accountability, I will say I am the only candidate that's actually worked in that office. I've done those investigations in the past. But my answer is going to go beyond that. I don't think that you can just have a unit and think that's going to do all the things we're looking for. I think the community expects more, and it really starts with the culture. So yeah, we do need safeguards. We do need to have a unit that's going to do investigations and formally make sure that we are documenting everything when complaints come forward. But it starts with holding ourselves accountable, right, as individuals. Before we can ask our community to let us hold them accountable, we have to demonstrate we're holding ourselves. And it's not just words, of course, it's got to also be actions. Because if you step out from either one, your community knows immediately. It's really important we focus on areas not only of just integrity, but also look for biases and use of force that's not equitable. That's setting expectations, also, of course, leading by example, but it's also how we communicate behind closed doors of how we do debriefs. How are those uses of force looked at? Our first level supervisors are our first line of defense on this. Where is their headspace? Are they trained well? Are they out there coaching and paying attention? All those things are really important. For me, part of the culture is expecting us to follow our oaths of office and serving the community. I keep coming back to that. If the culture is treating people with respect, regardless of the scenario we're at, I think that goes a long way with these strategies and holding people accountable. But it's also, as I'll finish up here, there's so many aspects. It is expectations, holding people to it, but training, bias policing, audits of use of force, and then also praising the great work. The people who do this work every day do a great job, and we need to continue to recognize them for it.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, we'll start with you. What policies and practices would you suggest to build trust in the office of sheriff?
Sure. So it starts with some of the basics, which we have laws that change every year for us in law enforcement. Every time there's a session in Olympia, usually there's tweaks to some laws. Some of those affect actual personnel policies. So the very first thing we have to do is be very deliberate and right on top of it when there's policy changes, make sure we're making those changes. That goes to professional standards in general. That's where we start building the core of our trust. One of the things that we may talk about later today a little bit more is accreditation. The sheriff's office used to be an accredited law enforcement agency. It is not currently, but that would be important to me to bring back because I think those best practices are super helpful in a variety of ways of building trust because we're doing it to the top standards that are expected of us. Certainly transparency, we've talked about that. that's not just being able to stand in front of the microphone and explain when we've made a mistake. Also standing in front of our folks if they've done everything right. That transparency goes both ways. I've talked often about a dashboard. There is some dashboards now at the sheriff's office, which is great with regard to crime. But I would actually expand that. There are some great resources out there that show personnel matters transparently on dashboards. And what I mean by that is performance related to employees. That is a dashboard that keeps up on pursuits, collisions, and uses of force. And the ones that I've seen, I'm really impressed by, are the ones that not only have use of force real time, but it also captures the demographics. Because of the stats on use of force with the communities of color, that's an area we have to work very hard on and make sure we are being transparent. Of course, partner with our communities, a community advisory team within the building that actually integrates into the agency, and spending time out having conversations in my neighborhoods.
Thank you so much. Mr. Fortney, your ideas on policies and practices.
Yeah, well, remember when I said I think it's important for elected leaders to be authentic? Well, here comes my authenticity. Everything she just said, we're doing. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I'm going to give some very specific examples. You do have to be transparent. Every person in government says they want to be, but are you walking the walk? Okay. I have been transparent. I tell everybody everywhere I go, you can ask me whatever you want, but you're not going to leave a room guessing where I am on a certain position or a decision that I made. I think that is incredibly important. Transparency. One, I'm the sheriff. Two, I'm the sheriff that brought body cams to the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. What better way to build public trust than audio and video record every law enforcement action you take? I was for it from day one. We were able to work very well with our partnerships in county government. It took us about 18 months and a lot of money to pull this off because big agency, but all the deputies that are working the streets tonight in Snohomish County have them because in transparency and building public trust is so important. Community Advisory Board. I've had one for 2 years, not an election year tactic for me. I've been doing the hard work for 2 years. It is very representative of our entire community. We rarely agree on almost anything, and that's the way I want it. That's the way it should be because we're getting in a room and having these conversations. The last question you just asked about where we got into Office of Professional Accountability and things like that, I am bringing my decisions to this community advisory board. Talk about ownership from the community. What better way to build trust? They are getting to see things internal at the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office that really no one else gets to see. And I love it. And then they provide me feedback and have actually influenced my decisions. If that's not a way to build public trust, I mean, I think my opponent and I both agree on that because we both said it. The only difference is I'm in the game right now, actually doing it, and have been doing it for years. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Fortney, we'll start here with you. Under your leadership, how would the Office of Sheriff address incidents of hate crimes and violent extremism?
Very seriously. It's absolutely an issue. We see what's going on in the world. And I can give a specific example that actually spans several years. A lot of times we had a very large racial incident occur, and this was probably 5 years ago, but we just got then we did the initial investigation. Partnerships with our federal government is very important when it comes to this. You've got to have a working relationship with them. And we did, and always have for that matter. So it's not a slight on any, we always have. They ended up taking that, and we got the conviction on that last year. I shouldn't say the federal government got a very large conviction of numerous people. So we have to be in the game. The other thing is the community. If whatever word you want to use, communities of color. I'm going to give a specific example. I recently have been introduced to a very large community, larger than I ever thought, and I'm from here. Is the Korean community in Snohomish County, a very large business ownership, a Korean community. They wanted to meet the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. I didn't delegate it. I went and met with them. And then our second meeting, they came up to my main office, the 4th floor, and got to meet the entire command staff. I think this is a valid description of that moment when it happened. They were overwhelmed. They thought they were coming to just meet me, but they had access to the entire sheriff's office. So we talked about hate crimes during that meeting and the Asian American community. So you have to be engaged with the community. I think authenticity is important. It is an election year for the sheriff, right? If they see me as just doing this as an election stunt, I'm going to get it's not going to work. They're not going to have value in those meetings. But I have a follow-up meeting, an event with this same group, the Korean community, tomorrow night. So the relationship develops, and then we have another one 2 weeks from now. So you got to be in the game. You have to prosecute these individuals when it does come up, and we do all of the above.
Thank you so much. Ms. Johnson, same question.
Yeah, this is a big deal. I'm really glad to see this question tonight. We've all followed the reports. The FBI has been very clear. This is the biggest threat to our nation and also our neighborhoods, our own community. Washington State's number 5, Snohomish County number 1 in the state for violent extremism as far as hate crimes and hate groups in our area, and it's very unnerving. The first thing we have to do is pay attention and acknowledge it, because there has not always been an acknowledgement that they are in Snohomish County. There are very strong partnerships out there. There are great organizations, the Anti-Defamation League, and of course our federal bureau partners track these cells and the movement not only locally but nationally. So we have to be tapped into them. Just like we track local gangs, we have to make sure we are meeting with our regional partners as well and sharing communication. And we need to talk to our community about red flags. What are the indicators out in the community, and be willing to share the things that people need to keep an eye out for. On hate crimes, we can spend a whole bunch of time just on hate crimes in general, outside of the extremist groups, because we've seen a huge uptick nationally and locally in hate crimes. And not only do we have violence, these are our neighbors and our family members, but also the mental health. I mean, there's the initial victimization, but also mental health has taken a huge hit as these hate crimes have occurred. We need to track bias incidents, which not every law enforcement agency does. We just started doing it where I work down in Bothell. And we also need some training of our law enforcement officers, because not every law enforcement officer knows how to deal with the LGBTQ community or our different communities of color in a sensitive manner that encourages one, to call 911, and also the crime prevention steps that we can share with them in a community setting.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, this is a similar question, but regarding a different issue. Under your leadership, how would the Office of Sheriff address the well-documented opioid crisis?
This is an area I have a lot of expertise, which is great. I feel like I've worked for 100 years, but within my career, I did work for 8.5 years at the Snohomish Regional Drug Task Force. So I was a narcotics detective for 8 years. So that's not only doing high-level federal cases, but also all the way to undercover operations. I understand the networks. To that end, it is critical that we continue our funding and support of our regional drug task forces. The fentanyl epidemic is a great example of just the network that if it goes unchecked, how quickly it can get out of hand. For us in Washington State, because we reduced our contacts with drug users because of the law changes until last summer, we kind of lost our grasp on addressing our users in our community. So a few things that I would do. Certainly, we probably all know, because of the law changes right now, that if you get caught by law enforcement, not dealing, but just using drugs, your first offense can be deferred if you go to treatment, and you'll have no criminal record. There's a whole component of my plan, which is, of course, reducing demand. I think we can all agree, if we could reduce demand and those that have addiction, get them help, that is a solid solution that takes care of people. And we haven't been doing much of that the last couple of years. Being able to arrest for drug use, I think, actually will help people on that path. But really, my focus would be on those dealers and traffickers. And let's be honest, we need to do a lot more for education. The thing that scares us all most is drugs in schools, and fentanyl especially, and how deadly it has become. So we need to bring everybody together. This is about partnerships, schools, community leaders, social programs, community health, health department. All of us have to come together on this.
Thank you. Mr. Fortney, same question.
Okay, you ready? We're polar opposites on this question, and I'll be very specific. It is a balance. It is a huge crisis right now, the fentanyl crisis, the opioid crisis, and you have to balance the compassion piece with the accountability piece, but you have to do both. In 2019, when I was a graveyard patrol sergeant running for office, my opponent's policy was we couldn't book into the jail, and not only that, we had to take the people back where we got them. So let me phrase that for you. We would catch somebody, say, breaking into your car, stealing your stuff. That's not a low level crime to me, but it's often referred to as that. Okay. We would take them to jail, be denied, and have to drive them back to where we got them. That is the reason I ran for sheriff. On day one, I was able to cancel that policy, and the Snohomish County Jail has been open to all bookings ever since. Now, I've already said this once. I'm going to say it again for clarification. Booking people in the jail that are high on drugs is not the answer to any of society's problems. But when they are committing a crime in our society, it can be a part of the solution. And not only that, we are doing innovative, unique things in the third largest jail in the state of Washington, where if people are ready, they can actually begin treatment. I actually was in front of the Snohomish County Council today and was asked this question, and we're getting ready to start a recovery module inside of the Snohomish County Jail so people can be in the same module working towards the same goals, addiction recovery, and we're going to provide services to that in partnership with others in county government. So we're a little bit different on this, and I want to be clear. The Snohomish County Sheriff's Office, the drug laws did change in the last 4 years. We never stopped enforcing the law. That is the difference. And I have a very strong relationship with the business owners in South Everett, where we are impacted geographically the most with this issue. They want us out there doing this. I have listened to the community. I have listened to how the community wants to be policed. And so we are doing the work. We've done it for 4 years. We have been innovative. And again, I want to say it a third time, jail is not the answer, but there has to be accountability in what we do.
Thank you. Okay, moving right along here, you guys. Stretch. Mr. Fortney, you're first on this issue. Please comment on current staffing levels within the sheriff's office. What changes, if any, would you recommend or work to implement?
Yeah, it's good and bad, and has been for a long time. So I'm going to talk about the staffing levels. Historically speaking, at the sheriff's office, it's always been rough, and it still is to this day. I already mentioned I was in front of the Snohomish County Council today. I asked for 30 more deputy sheriffs, and I brought many staffing studies that have been done throughout our history, including one in my administration, to kind of back up that evidence. So tough conversation to have with council, because that's a very large lift and a lot of money. But on the good side of things, we need better staffing. No doubt about it. And that's when I said it was so difficult to move people into our OPA unit to build some of that public trust. That's why, because we need staffing office wide, and our county is growing like crazy. Everybody recognizes that. Doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you might be on. And so public safety in the county, we need to catch up with that. So I got to let me review that question. Recruitment. So 2020, we had a hiring freeze. I agreed to it. I'll never agree to it again as the elected sheriff. And that the reason is because you shut down a large hiring operation in public safety, you can't flip a switch and get it back on. So in 2021, we flipped that switch. It came back on, but it took us 3 months to get it up and running. We just have a system. You have to do polygraph, physical fitness tests. It takes a while. Background investigation. In 2021 and 2022, we set hiring records at the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office, and I am very proud of that. That continued into 2023 and was part of my presentation to council today. Our hiring trends are really good right now. And again, I'm being honest. We have some room. We got to make up some ground, but we are making up ground, and that looks to continue into 2024. We hired. I wish I didn't have to hire 100 people, but we've already surpassed the number 100 this year, and that's all. That's not just cops. I want to be clear. That's all across the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office, and I am so incredibly proud of our recruitment and retention division for both keeping people here and recruiting new people.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fortney. Ms. Johnson, same question.
Well, even though it's going to eat into my 2 minutes, I have to make a comment back on the previous question my opponent answered, and remind him that I actually wasn't the previous sheriff when he talks about policies and taking people back to the jail. I was not the sheriff. So not my policy. But moving on, I'll answer this question with regard to current staffing levels. The information I have as of today is there are 115 vacancies, roughly 46 on the law enforcement side, 69 on the correction side. Also, we'll give a shout out to my friends that are doing hiring there, that they did hit 100 hires. I mean, we've talked about that before. I think that's fabulous. At the beginning of the year, they shared that they needed to hire 100. They hit that 100, and now they have 115 vacancies. So you do the math. They've lost more than they've hired. So usually your best strategy for staffing is retention. I would agree that hiring has been challenging for many law enforcement agencies the last few years, but almost all of them are on the same trajectory as our agency, which has been picking up steam and doing better and better. And if I'm following those numbers, more going out than coming in. And that usually means other issues, which could be a variety of things. I only know some things anecdotally, but I can talk about what I've been trained on with regard to retention, which can be morale, it can be policies, it can be a lot of things with regard to strategies, and if people feel valued and if they understand direction. So what I've done in the past for hiring, we've been successfully doing is changing the marketing so that we hit those people that want to come into law enforcement now. We sell service. We sell variety. We're finding more people better educated than I've ever seen before by sharing just the compassion of doing the job. And that's where the money is right now with our youth that are coming into law enforcement.
Thank you. Okay, we have just 4 questions left. You both are doing amazingly well. I really want to congratulate you on your respectful and thoughtful answers. And as we hit down here to the end, okay. I'm starting with Ms. Johnson. What training or resources should be required or provided to respond to mental health related calls?
Yes, this is a big portion of our work these days, of course. As just a quick review, the expectations on law enforcement have continued to go up year over year over year. And even though there's a lot of resources I'm going to talk about with regard to partnering with law enforcement, whether you want to talk about co-responders or other resources, which, by the way, every cop likes. We love the idea of people coming and helping us that are professionals, that have the training and experience. But we are also, keep in mind, we're the only thing open 24/7. So those 911 calls come to us and we try the best we can. So the tools we need to use, they're out there now, but we ought to make sure we're capitalizing on them, is crisis intervention training. There's minimum training we have to do each year. Doing more than that helps our officers and deputies be more prepared. Of course, de-escalation training, that's been formalized over the year. Those are some great tools, but also we need to learn some humanity there. I do think bias training also has a component. And then there's a training I've been exposed to called Poverty 101, and it teaches humanity with officers and dealing with folks that are housing unstable. So there's a lot of things that can help us understand a little bit more in the moment, but we need to expand resources. The dual response is great. I would look to expand it to crisis response teams, which is, we already have social workers that'll come out. There's many programs out there like that. More and more you can find the ones that have mental health professionals that can come out to the scene and join you at the hip, at the door. Yes, any professional resources that can come out and partner with law enforcement, we're all about that. And if we don't have to have a gun and badge there, great. I do believe that for now, I think the best way is for us to be alongside those social workers. I would not want them solo in the field just for their safety, but there's a lot of room to grow in this area, and I'm excited to see where we can take it.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Fortney, your response.
Yeah, if your information is anecdotal, you probably should get some real data and evidence. I'm not going to allow my agency and the people that work there to be talked down when we just surpassed 100 hires and it's never been done before in history. So the vacancy rates, the anecdotal, I don't know what she's talking about, but I just presented to council this morning on our vacancy rates, and I was honest. We have some room to make up, but man, we are hiring fantastic people, and the new generation keeps raising their hand, and they want to work at the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. It is fantastic. So I just had to clear that up. gun and a badge. You don't need a gun and a badge to go everything. Mental health. We did a pilot project. It's still going on with Human Services because we have a great partnership within county government. So we are doing the work already. You'll see a theme here that my opponent just described. We can call a designated crisis responder. We call them DCRs whenever we want, and we can get that assistance when needed. What I have found through 27 years of doing this job is when the police get very good at talking to people in mental health and crisis, but there absolutely is a time where maybe the cop is not the right person, but we still need to be there. So yeah, absolutely. And when you don't need a gun and a badge, that was actually presented to me as a new sheriff back in 2020 in front of council again and said, Adam, do you really need a gun and a badge to go to everything? Because people didn't want that in 2020. And I said, I was honest with them. I said, no, you know what? You're right. There is some stuff that we can do that it doesn't require a deputy sheriff with the gun and a badge. So the crime prevention that's been mentioned a couple times here tonight, we are doing it. I'm the one who went and asked for that in the budget request 2 years ago, and they've been on the streets for a year doing crime prevention, not a badge and a gun. So it's something in between that. They are great at education. Our business community loves them. So again, I'm going to reiterate the theme is everything my opponent is saying, we are doing in some context already.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Fortney, I'd like to start with you here. Last year, the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office began using body cameras, as you mentioned earlier. First as part of a pilot project in 922, and then as standard practice in 1222. What have been the pros and cons of this change to policing practices?
Well, no cop likes change. So the change has been big. I mean, can you imagine? I don't know with everybody listening to this tonight in your profession, if you were audio and video recorded, everything you did at work, there can be some uncomfortable moments. And there's been a learning curve, man. There really has been, but it was absolutely the right thing to do. The pros are the transparency and the public trust. Those are the pros. The pros are that what we have found is that the vast majority of the time, the body cam will capture, cops doing good things, or we might get a complaint. Now we have body cam where we can go see what really happened. If they messed up, I have an OPA unit to hold that cop accountable, right? That's a good thing. But if they didn't mess up, we now have evidence that could go either way. So those are the pros and cons. The body cams are awesome as a sheriff because now I can tell my story. I've been doing this 27 years with no body cam. I didn't have cell phones when I started back in the day. And so we didn't have that option. We are just starting to tell our story at the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office with body cam footage. And I think that is great for the community to see. The most recent one that we published was what might be deemed, this came up earlier, a lower level crime. It was a shoplift at a local grocery store where the deputy rolled up on scene like this, saw the suspect as described to him, and the suspect just charged right at him as he was getting out of his car. I can tell you that in words, but it doesn't have the impact where you see this happen actually in audio and video, and him try to tackle this deputy sheriff who's just rolling up and try to investigate the crime that he was dispatched to. So body cams are a game changer for us for all of those reasons. They are great for both external accountability and internal accountability. That's the cops.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, same question.
We'll have a little bit of a different view because we are still trying to get body cameras at our police department. We're trying to achieve the financial piece of that. So super excited that county government, county exec, everybody came together to make that happen. And I agree. These are great tools. Law enforcement, by and large, support this. It's pretty rare that you don't see support. We did already talked about transparency, of course, but additionally, we find that people do a better job report writing. The studies I've read also talk about the training component. So you generally will do a debrief after an incident, and nothing's better than, and I've seen some of the debriefs with body-worn cameras that you can actually walk through and see tactically, maybe I should have been at this location behind the car versus outside the driver's door. So it's a great learning tool. We use a lot of video training now to reaffirm with our new employees when they come out, just to make sure they understand their reps and stuff and what they see and others see. So I think there's so many things that can come from this. we also use similar videos for de-escalation practice. So there's nothing but good stuff that comes from it. The only challenges that come to the public sector, of course, is the public disclosure pieces. These are huge burdens on staff. And yes, the public has a right to have them, and responding to them takes a lot of time because you have to make sure that there's areas that get blurred out that might be private. And it's a lot of burden to government just to produce them. But that's why the cost is so high. It's not even so much the equipment as much as public disclosure. But yes, all in, absolutely support body worn cameras. And I think they're good transparency tools.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Okay, we would like to start with you here on this issue. What should be the role of the sheriff's office related to emergency planning and preparedness, response, and recovery? Ms. Johnson.
Sure. Yeah. The county itself is a primary responsibility for these responsibilities. So I think it's RCW 38 or something. But yeah, the county emergency manager, county sheriff, we are responsible for the search and rescue, response, and recovery, all those things. And we do this really, really well in Snohomish County. Our search and rescue teams and units, there's a few that are full-time employees and hundreds of volunteers, and they have relationships throughout the region, do an amazing job. Snohomish County is a beautiful place to live and work. And we have obviously great hiking and outdoor activities, and sometimes it puts people in trouble. So just everyday recreating creates calls for them. But also on the preparedness, we have floods, right? It hasn't been too long since we have floods. We do emergency preparedness in our communities, all the way down to earthquake preparedness for individual homes. All of that is very important, and not only our responsibility, but also our honor to provide. Talking for a moment about search and rescue and the people that do that work at risk to selves, and the volunteer program is, I just can't say enough about them. You can go look online, some of the amazing things they've done. I've had the honor to work with them over the years as a lieutenant and as a captain. I've been out in the scenes with them. The OSO slide, I was able to actually work out there as a law enforcement operations commander for periods of time. And I've never seen anything more horrific as the OSO slide, but also the community that came together out and working. And for anybody that lived in Snohomish County at that time knows about that. And in just a moment, those people that do that every day are absolutely amazing. And I'm honored to be associated with any of them, even just in passing.
Thank you. Mr. Fortney, your response.
Overall emergency preparedness, yeah, we have to be in the game, and we are. I want everybody in the community that hears this to know that. We have a full-time lieutenant, which is it's a fairly high ranking at our office, dedicated to emergency management, training, and planning, all of the above. And that's where partnerships also come into play. You know, we don't always want to go to the scene. Sometimes we are looked to for decision making, but we got to be planning with our fire partners. I have a document on my desk today planning with the fire department on what we're learning from the Bolt Creek fire from last year, big fire out in East County. And so that took federal resources, state resources, and local resources. And what can we learn from that? So that is going on constantly. That is going on all the time. All during the pandemic, we had a lieutenant that was stationed outside of the sheriff's office to plan for resources as they came up and were needed. So we have been in the game for 4 years. Now I'm going to talk about search and rescue. I am so thankful my opponent brought that up, and I think it's something we can agree on. We're not going to disagree here. They are fantastic, fantastic people. I'll be a little bit more specific. We have, I think it's 4 right now, 4 full-time search and rescue, either sergeants or deputies who do it full time, and they coordinate a lot of work. But we have over 400 volunteers. A lot of people don't know that in Snohomish County. Everything from medics to doctors to helicopter rescue people to pilots. It is a fantastic organization. The chief pilot is an employee, and he's a 22-year retired Army pilot, Chief Quistorf. And he came to me. He was the very first briefing I got. He did this on purpose because he's a smart man. And when I came in the office as sheriff, and he told me everything I need to know about our helicopters that we had. And he said, Adam, we got to get a new one. So I took that to heart, and it took for 10 years, 15 years, sheriff's office has been trying to get a helicopter. With our partnerships we've built, we finally have one to continue some of this emergency preparedness.
Thank you so much. And we are at our final question, which is one that I am always interested in hearing these responses. We'd like to start with Mr. Fortney. And it's please tell us something about your life experience that might surprise or intrigue us.
Campaign years are a very long year. No, that's not what I'm going to say. I'm just kidding. But very true. I'm talking about my family. That's kind of not an easy one for me, but we're a blended family. My wife, Jill, we have 8 children. That surprises a lot of people. All of them are adults. Both Jill and I started very young. I had a son at 18 years old when I joined the Navy. I have to say, joining the Navy and having a son at 18 years old changed the trajectory of my life in a good way. I could have gone either way, but it did it in a good way. And I am so thankful for all of that. And then both my opponent and I have been serving for decades in Snohomish County, and that's a great thing. And I like to think that my kids picked up a little bit of that from me. So let me describe that just a little bit. I'm going to try to remember them all. It's a lot. I got a son who works for DCYF, the state of Washington, helping kids in foster homes and things like that. So he has his degree. He's done really well, and now he's out helping kids. I love that. We got a United States Marine that's in Hawaii right now. I think that's cool. I've got a daughter that is in the Army Guard. She's deployed to Syria, deployed overseas. I think it's cool. I raised a whole bunch of daughters, and so I raised them and taught them as their dad they can do whatever they want, and that is very important to me. And to have someone who's active duty Army and deployed to Syria, I think that's pretty cool. I got one who's teaching in the elementary school that the district that she grew up in Lake Stevens, so it's gone full circle. She has her master's degree. I think that's cool. I got one teaching children in South Korea, teaching kindergartners English. She just got her degree this last spring, and then she said, "Dad, I'm going to go back to South Korea because I loved it, and I'm going to teach kids for a year." So they also have a little bit of spirit in them and individuality, which I absolutely love. And then we have some that live in Lake Stevens here, that are a married couple that have 2 of our grandkids, and I have another grandkid in Eastern Washington. We're very busy.
Thank you, Mr. Fortney. Miss Johnson, same question.
Okay. Thank you for your service, Adam. I appreciate that. I was going to actually talk about, I've volunteered for youth for more than 30 years. My plan was to talk about that. And then in hearing you ask the question again, a lot of people know that. So I'm going to go a different path. And I'm going to talk about a life experience that specifically happened to me when I was working at the sheriff's office. I haven't really talked about this much. So I don't know if my voice is going or if it's just the experience, but it is a short story. I was working Graveyard South. I was a patrol deputy. I was in the Martha Lake area. I had a call for service come over the radio. I happened to be really close to the area when the radio went off. It was an assist fire call for traffic control. So I envisioned red trucks in the street or fire hoses. I come around the corner and the whole sky's lit up. I'm ahead of fire. Fire's not there yet, and it's a fully engulfed house fire. A woman runs to me at my patrol car and says, there's people trapped in the house. And later I realized I parked my car right in the middle of the street, car door open. Probably didn't make it easy for the red trucks to get there. Could not find a way into the house. Searching, bottom floor is fully engulfed, went around to the back, ended up getting up on this deck of a porch that led to a kitchen. It's the only door that I can see that's not fully engulfed. There was a gentleman that was a security officer, happened to follow me up the steps. A propane tank blows up, and then suddenly we spot a man in the doorway. And the short story is, we are able to lift him and drag him out a great distance before that deck fell off the house, which was an honor. He survives. He had terrible burns. Not everybody did survive that fire, so I've always been challenged with dealing with that. But a few years later, I got to be with that family when they dedicated Support 7, which is a huge asset for the fire district. And that was part of my mental recovery, is being out there when they put Support 7 out and dedicated it to that family.
Thank you so much, Ms. Johnson. Thank you for those stories. I really appreciate knowing that information. The League thanks these candidates for joining us and for running for office. A recording of this forum and others will be available on the League of Women Viewers, Voters of Snohomish County website and YouTube channel. Find links at lwvsnoho.org. We encourage you to explore additional information about these and all candidates. Vote411.org, sponsored by the League, is another good source of information. The Snohomish County voter pamphlet will be mailed starting October 18th. Ballots will be mailed starting October 19th, and Election Day is November 3rd. Please be a voter. Thank you to our League Candidate Forum team, and special thanks to Dave Moon and the Sultan School students at turkpride.tv who make this live stream possible. And of course, thank you all for joining us. This concludes our candidate forum.